Now on Indianapolis This Week, the final countdown in the race for mayor of Indianapolis. Republican Chuck Brewer, Democrat Joe Hogsett, both on set answering questions in the final days before the election. Plus, the Benghazi hearings.
Well, that is a yes or no question, Madam Secretary. I'm sorry.
We talk with Indiana's Susan Brooks about her questions for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. We invite you to join us right now on social media. We're on Twitter at Indy This Week. Follow us and let's talk. Let's begin with the race for mayor. We're now just 9 days away from selecting the next mayor of Indianapolis. And today we have both candidates for the office right here answering questions. Let's start with Democrat Joe Hogsett. He's with our Jason Fechner.
Thank you, Rafael, and Mr. Hogsett, thanks for being with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
Let's start with crime and public safety. More shootings, more homicides in the news every day or so at this point. You've told me before that we can't arrest our way out of this. For those who don't know, what's your plan?
Yeah, I think that that's very important. Law enforcement is an important component to long-term public safety needs, but my public safety plan focuses primarily on investing in our kids at the earliest stages. A robust pre-K program, quality educational opportunities K through 12, a summer jobs program which I've proposed for at-risk youth. That kind of investment is designed, I would hope, to keep kids out of the criminal justice system altogether. You know, in the past, what we focused on is how do we changed the course of direction that kids have made if they've made bad choices, if they've been arrested for petty crimes or getting involved in gangs or the drug trade. I'd like to short-circuit that and try to find a way that we can protect our kids from getting involved in the criminal justice system altogether, and that begins with investment in our youth.
We've talked about adding more police officers as well. People are dying on the streets right now. How quickly could adding more police officers change what's going on out there?
Yeah, I think adding police officers has a couple of important value-added aspects to it. First, not only you get more officers, and you probably will get more arrests and more law enforcement, but that's not really the benefit that I see in adding 150 officers. The benefit comes twofold. Number one, every neighborhood gets to know their police officer, and every police officer gets to know their neighborhood, because with more street cops, we can return to a community-based or a neighborhood-oriented or a beat-based jurisdictional setup over and against what IMPD currently does, which is more of a zone coverage. I would hope that that would allow police officers to do more proactive policing. And the last benefit is, if the communities get to know their law enforcement officers and vice versa, I think that that will raise the level of community trust in IMPD, so that we'll see fewer and fewer instances of complaints about police conduct, and hopefully the community and the police can come together to eradicate crime in our neighborhoods.
Additional police officers, additional streetlights. You've talked about tearing down abandoned homes, potential infrastructure improvements, mass transit investment potentially as well. Does the city have the money for all this right now?
Well, the city's finances are very tight. I'm not going to soft soap that. It's true that fiscal home rule is not something that the Indiana General Assembly has been historically interested in providing us. But I have been the kind of public official that is fairly tight with the public's dollar. Every year that I've been in public office, I've reduced spending, and that's the kind of attitude that I would bring to city government. Now, where we get additional revenue and resources, I applaud Mayor Ballard's efforts to try to encourage people to relocate downtown. That helps with property tax revenue. That helps with income tax revenue. I would seek to continue that kind of investment, but frankly, not just limit it to downtown revitalization, but also in our neighborhoods, particularly those that surround the downtown. I think ultimately that's a good way to build the revenue stream that the city is dependent upon.
What is your view of the job that Mayor Greg Ballard has done?
Oh, I think Mayor Ballard has a legacy that he will be very proud of. Certainly, he has been an outstanding leader in terms of Rails to Trails programs, general greening of our city, issues of sustainability, and environmentally friendly technology. I think that's the legacy that Greg Ballard will leave. But the truth is, we have had a series of outstanding mayors in Indianapolis, which has allowed Indianapolis to really prosper and to grow. When you go from Lugar to Hudnut to Goldsmith to Peterson to now Ballard, those are big shoes to fill. So I have my work cut out for me if the people elect me.
Now, when it comes to leading the city forward, what's the main difference between you and your opponent, Chuck Brewer? Oh,
I think there are many aspects of both Mr. Brewer's candidacy and my candidacy that are worthy. I think regardless of who gets elected, I think Indianapolis will be in good hands. But now, having said that, I would think that the main thing that I bring to this race that perhaps Mr. Brewer doesn't is the background as the federal prosecutor. I served for 4 years fighting the worst of the worst throughout the Southern District of Indiana, not just here in Indianapolis, but in many communities in the 60 counties that make up the Southern District. So I'm a proven crime fighter. I have very good relationships, not only with local law enforcement, but I would bring, hopefully, a vertical approach to law enforcement, meaning not only horizontally on the local level, but also bringing state police and federal law enforcement agencies into the mix. Those are the kinds of relationships that I think I would want to take advantage of to help make our neighborhoods safe again.
Mr. Joe Hogsett, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. Raphael?
He's the guy looking to pull off an upset. Republican Chuck Brewer joins us next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. This on the race for mayor of Indianapolis. This week, a new twist.
8 years ago, I was the underdog, but voters gave me a chance, and we made a lot of progress.
Mayor Greg Ballard appearing in television ads for Republican Chuck Brewer, hoping to recreate the upset win back in 2007. Chuck Brewer is now with our Katie Hines.
Chuck, thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Wanted to jump right into our questions. I know the topic of public safety has taken center stage in the mayor's race. How do you plan to reduce crime if elected?
Well, you know, my perspective on public safety is very personal. You know, I'm a Marine with 23 years of experience and 2 combat tours in Iraq. I know something about protecting people. My focus is giving our public safety officials the right equipment and technology that they need to be efficient and effective in dealing with what is arguably our biggest issue right now, which is drugs on our streets.
I know that we've seen the murder rate continuing to rise, and among an alarmingly young population, both of victims and suspects. Is enough being done to help the city's youth?
Well, we talk a lot about stopping crime before it really gets situated in people's minds at a young age as their only opportunity. When we think about ways that we can do this, we have to start when they're young, and we have to create access to jobs, after-school programs that present our youth with the perspective that a life of crime is not going to be the right route for them. In my education plan, I talk about creating a summer jobs program. I also talk about, as a small business owner, my ability and understanding on how to create more jobs all across the county for kids to get access to so that they have opportunities that right now they don't.
Your economic development plan, I know, includes certain areas of the city, a focus on those. How did you pick those particular areas and streets, and how do you plan to attract jobs and businesses to the area?
Yeah. So what my economic development plan does is it talks about shifting the focus, the city's focus and resources from the downtown area, which is very well situated and headed in the right direction, out into the economic corridors that radiate out of our city. We all know these main thoroughfares. Many of them have just not naturally developed over time. The city has some pretty good economic tools that have used downtown, like in Fountain Square and Mass Avenue, to develop those areas. Now it's time for us to use those same economic tools to create jobs and incentives for small and medium-sized businesses to start popping up close to where we live.
I know that your opponent has touted the benefits of a robust pre-K program. Do you plan to expand that? And what other ideas do you have for education? You touched on it here a little bit already.
Yeah, so the pre-K program is, meant to provide opportunities for low-income families to get their children into pre-K before kindergarten, get them started in education early. Now, this is a program that was one of the marquees of Mayor Ballard's administration, and I applaud his efforts in there to get this started. At the end of the day, the city is funding it. We're funding it with some of our corporate partners for the next 5 years. But, this is a priority, and the city's going to have to continue to fund it because it is a major issue that we have to invest in. Now, I am going to lobby the state and the legislature to make sure that they come on board and help us fund it. But this is a priority. The city's got to fund this thing. And, the reality is that people, including my opponent, don't think that the city should fund this. They think that the state should fund it. It's just too big of an issue not to put our money where our mouth is.
We saw part of the endorsement from Mayor Greg Ballard for you here just a few minutes ago. Is there anything he would have done differently if you had been in office during his term?
Well, Mayor Ballard has done a tremendous amount of investing in the city. There was a great need for downtown focus. That is headed in the right direction now. But my focus is going to be economic development as a small business owner and as an entrepreneur and as somebody that understands how to create jobs on a daily basis. I'm going to do that out in our neighborhoods closer to where we live. Yeah.
Why do you think you're the best choice for mayor of Indianapolis?
Well, the voters have a clear choice between two very different candidates. One that's been involved in politics for 40 years and me, a non-politician, an entrepreneur and a business owner, and that's a pretty clear difference. I am not focused in the politics. I'm focused on getting things done, and I think that's a refreshing change for people who have been really frustrated with their neighborhoods and the infrastructure and not seeing the kinds of changes that they expect in their city, and I'm going to take care of that.
Mr. Brewer, we appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Katie, thank you so much. The marathon hearing in Washington, D.C. Hillary Clinton answering questions about Benghazi and those emails. We're talking with Congresswoman Susan Brooks about that hearing next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on Hillary Clinton testified before the House committee investigating the deadly attack in Benghazi. Clinton testifying 11 hours on Thursday, answering questions about the September 11th, 2012 attack that killed U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens and 3 other people. Among the committee members, Indiana Republican Susan Brooks, and a tense exchange with Brooks questioning Clinton about a 51-page document outlining dozens of violent attacks against U.S. facilities in Libya in the months before the deadly assault.
Am I wrong? Did you ever talk to Ambassador Stevens when all of this was going on in the hotbed of Libya? Well, that is a yes or no question, Madam Secretary. I'm sorry. Did you ever personally speak to Ambassador Stevens after? We don't know the answer. Did you ever personally speak to him after you swore him in May? Yes or no, please?
Yes, I believe I did. But
and when was that?
I don't recall. Congresswoman, look, I appreciate, and I really do, the passion and the intensity of your feelings about this. We have diplomatic facilities in war zones. We have ambassadors that we send to places that have been bombed and attacked all the time.
And you're their boss. Is that correct?
You're right, I am.
You're their leader. Is that correct? And are there ever situations where you call them, where you bring them in, where you are personally caring and concerned and are letting them know that?
Joining us now is Congresswoman Susan Brooks. Congresswoman, you asked a lot of direct questions of the former Secretary of State. Did you get the answers you wanted?
I think a lot of what we learned was that she wasn't really aware of, in my view, of the dangerous posture. I think security was handled at a much lower level. And while she feels responsible, she actually specifically said that security concerns were not her responsibility specifically. And so that was very troubling. We also learned that there seemed to be a significant drop-off in interest when I put up all of the email communications that her team sent her about Libya. There was significantly more in 2011, and then after Gaddafi fell in late 2011, and while violence still continued in 2012, there were very few communications from her team to her about Benghazi or about Libya and the incredible violence there throughout that city.
And Congresswoman, after that marathon session, do you think there's a need to call her back to answer more questions, or were you satisfied with the hearing that was on Capitol Hill?
I believe that the Secretary did answer our questions. I don't see a need for us to call her back. The only thing that could change that is that we do not have all of the email communications between a number of top-level officials at the State Department. So we're still waiting. In fact, we don't even have all of Chris Stevens' emails. We received 1,300 on Tuesday, a couple of days before the hearing. And so we're still receiving a lot of information. And this is not about emails. Emails are just communications, and we're trying to get to the facts and find out what requests were made, who knew what and when, and how, how did that information or the request for all that security, how did it make it, who within the department did it make it to, and what was their decision making, what was the Secretary's decision making about the mission in Benghazi and Libya. And
ma'am, how do you answer those that say that this committee has become partisan, that what we saw on Thursday was a political witch hunt?
The Secretary is one fact witness, and we have many more to go. We've already interviewed 54 people, most of whom had never been interviewed by any other congressional committees, including 7 who were eyewitnesses to the attack. They had never been interviewed by congressional committees in the past. So we're doing a very focused investigation. We plan on, she was leading the agency where we lost, 2 State Department officials. We needed to ask her, in doing a thorough investigation as the leader of that agency, what was her role? What did she do? What did she know? What decisions did she make? And how do we improve these things going forward?
Want to shift gears? You're looking at a big week on Capitol Hill next week with the vote on Congressman Paul Ryan. Will you support him as the next Speaker of the House?
I will support him. I am proud to support him. I think he is an excellent spokesperson for not only the Republican conference, but I think for the entire House of Representatives. I think he will provide a very bold vision about how the conservative agenda can apply best to all people in this country. And I think he is a very action-focused person, and that is what the House needs. We need more action. We need to move the country forward, and I think he is the right type of leader to bring us together, not only as a party, but as a country, and help move us forward.
Congresswoman Susan Brooks joining us via FaceTime from her congressional office there in Washington, D.C. Congresswoman, we thank you for your time.
Thanks, Raphael.
It is now time to welcome in our political insiders, Adam Kirsch and Pete Seat. Benghazi, the winners, the losers.
Well, I'd say the big winner from my perspective is the person you just interviewed there, Susan Brooks. She was well prepared, she was direct in her questioning, and very respectful. Some of her colleagues on that panel were, let's say, partisan in their questioning.
Some of your fellow Republicans.
And yeah, I think they were partisan in some respects. But I thought Susan was very respectful of Secretary Clinton. And as painful as it is for me to say this, I thought Hillary Clinton was a winner. Compared to the last time she talked about this issue, no gaps.
I think that's clear. I think Secretary Clinton handled 11 hours of certainly aggressive questioning with tact and with patience, and answered questions fully. Benghazi's now been investigated, in quotes, more than Pearl Harbor, more than the Kennedy assassination, more than Watergate was at the congressional level. And we've seen leading Republicans say this is simply to hurt Hillary Clinton, and it's, quite frankly, not working.
On the state side, there was talk of a sneak attack on Organization Day coming up here in November, that there would be some sort of bill passed on that day regarding gay rights. Was that really going to happen?
I don't think it was really going to happen. I think Eric Miller is a leader in the Republican Party who is worried that common sense legislation to protect all Hoosiers from discrimination is going to pass in the legislative session, and he's using scare tactics to try and raise money for his organization.
I think the video he put out proves that he's not a leader and he wants to get back to a position that he once had. It came off like one of those 4-page direct mail pieces, though, where they predict doom and gloom if you don't elect someone or reject someone at the ballot box, and I don't think it's going to win anything other than a little mention on some TV shows.
Has he lost his influence?
Clearly not. He stood behind Governor Pence at the RFRA signing, was one of the few people who was in the closed press signing of the bill. So clearly he's still close to Governor Pence.
But if you listen to Bosma, Long, and the others, Eric Miller does not have the influence.
The producer of this program is a Cardinals fan. You are a Cubs fan.
Yeah.
Are you commiserating together?
Well, I'm a proud season ticket holder. A little sad, well, very sad over what happened, but a great season, a great team, very young. They're going to go far in the future.
So let me hear that. So it's next year then for the Cubs?
It's always next year. Always next year.
Guys, thank you so much. You can follow our official account and our insiders, of course, at Indy This Week. News and updates every day of the week. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. You can find much more of our coverage of the mayoral races in Indianapolis and across central Indiana on the RTV6 app, as well as our website, theindychannel.com. For Katie Hines and Jason Fechner and the rest of the RTV6 News team, have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next week.